Very happy to be with you today in the first meeting of the Good Shepherd. It's a new meeting for youth that we're launching here at the church, and for people who have time to come on Sunday, because some of you attend on Saturday, some can't because of their time schedule. So it's good to have you today. We are going to launch that meeting every other week. So we'll have another meeting in 15 days from now. In April, we will not have the chance to have the meeting because we have the feast, we have a celebration of the feast of the church, we have the opening of the church in Hasselt. So it's going to be a very busy month of April, but then we will continue again in the month of May. And hopefully we get to prepare an outing at one point of time. The servants of this meeting are Marlene and Sylvia and Mira and Paula and myself. And we're very happy to have you with us. We're trying as much as possible to answer questions through these meetings, especially the challenges that our youth are facing on day to day. And on Saturdays, we focus more on the basics of the Christian faith, how to live that faith in the society. On Sunday, we're trying as much as possible to look at questions of identity. But it might happen that we mix up both subjects because, Christian faith is one holy thing. So we will not gonna divide it into several things, but we'd like very much as possible to discuss the questions and the subjects that are of concern for the young people. There is no church without young people, and there is no young people with a future without the church. So both entities are one and they need each other. Today, we're going to focus a bit on a question that I think most of us get, which is, who are you? I hope it shows there. Yeah, who are you? There is not a single person who doesn't get that question. Everybody gets that question. If you have been born outside of Belgium, people sometimes ask you the question, or you can read it in their eyes. Who are you? Where are you coming from? Why is your accent a bit different? Why do you have a different name? Why is your family name a bit different than others? So you might get that question. If you decided to join the church, you will also get that question inside the church. What were you doing before? What is your origin? Why are you joining the church? So everybody gets that question. There is no single human being who doesn't get that. If not directly, then indirectly. And we all are experts to feel that question coming from our surroundings. Sometimes people are polite, conservative, but as I said, you can read it in their eyes. Sometimes they ask it directly. Who are you? Actually, that's not the most difficult question. If you are asked, who are you? The most difficult one, if you start asking it to yourself, who am I? Who am I? Am I Belgian? Am I non-Belgian? Am I Coptic? Am I not Coptic? Am I Christian? Am I a lawyer? Am I a pharmacist? Am I an accountant? Who is it? Who am I? It's a question that everybody asks to himself. Children don't ask these questions usually. They might ask, who's my dad? Where is God? These kinds of things. But usually the questions of identity start arising at your teenage. When you start noticing that you look different, when you start noticing that your body is evolving in ways that you wouldn't have imagined, when you start connecting with people, some like you, some don't like you, some at the class, at the school connect with you, some don't like to connect with you. You start liking a specific sport, not everybody likes it. You start reading books, not everybody likes it. You start thinking in ways that nobody really likes it. So you start, I'm not one in many, I'm unique, I'm different. And then you ask yourself, is that good or bad? Sometimes you like it that you're different, that you look different, that you act different, that you think different. Sometimes it's hard to digest that you're different. And some people start feeling isolated, feeling that they're not a part of many, that why do people treat me differently? So it's a very, very solid question. Actually, people spend their whole lives answering the question, who am I? Who are you? Because it's a very important question in your life. I'd like to refer to a slide, next slide, in a situation that happened in the Bible. Look, it is a fact that the Bible was written 2,000 years ago. It is a fact. And some people might think that names of the people in the Bible are different, their societies were different, what they used to wear is different, what they used to say is different, but that's not very, very much the case. because the Word of God is always living, and the Word of God is useful at any time. I want to share with you the story that most of you might know, which is the story of three young men living in Babylon. So they were people living in a society that was not theirs. And those people, do you know their names? Everyone has two names. They have Jewish names and they have Babylonian names. So we have the Jewish names, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael. And they have also Babylonian names, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Many people have two names, and sometimes those two names refer to a couple of identities. Even you might have the same name, so you might be Paul, but at home they call you Bol or Bola, and at work they call you Paul. So it's the same name, but answered or pronounced differently. But it happens that you have a name at church, you have a name at home, you're Kyrillos when you go to the university, but you're Kyro when you go to the church, for example. Isn't it the case? So in a way, many people have two names, even if it's a nickname. And those three people were living in a very foreign land. It was far away from their home. People spoke a different language than they used to speak at home. They had different traditions when they used to have at home. They had a different religion because they were Jewish, they were belonging to the people of God, but they were living in a Babylonian society which didn't believe in God. They had very different ways of living. They were even eating different things. At home, they were eating kind of a food that was allowed by the religion, kosher or something like this, but they were asked to eat something very different when they were outside of home in their society. So those three people had somehow struggled with their identity. And they were asking themselves, who are we? Are we Babylonian or are we Jewish? Who are we? Are we people living in the society or are we people cast out of the society? And that is a question that I said many of us ask to ourselves. And you can theoretically ask yourself a lot of questions until this question is put at test, when you have a very hard test in front of you. Let me explore more the identities in the next slide. As I said, you can see them as Babylonians. Yes, their passport said they are Babylonians. They belong to the mightiest kingdom of all time. You can't compare them as Americans in the current conditions. America is the biggest country in the world, the mightiest, most military power. At the time, Babylon was the strongest country in the world. And the head of Babylon, who was like a Caesar or like king, was the strongest king of the world. And his name was Nebuchadnezzar. And he was a very, very strong guy. And when I say strong, meant that his entourage was the most highly educated. They were very wealthy. He had a very big, powerful army, and he had a very fancy palace that was one of the wonders of the world. The gardens of Babylon were known to be one of the wonders of the world. So if you had the luck to become a Babylonian, you were very lucky, because it meant that you belonged to the strongest country in the world. You had a very strong passport. You can do whatever you want. And you were living a very, very easy life compared to the people who were living in other countries, such as Turkey or such as the desert or such as Europe. Europe didn't even exist as a civilization at the moment. So in a way, you can consider them very lucky because they were living in the country that is the wealthiest in the world. They had the strongest passport. So they were Babylonian, but they're also Jewish, which posed a big problem because they don't act, speak, eat, think like others. So they were torn apart between the fact that they belonged to Babylonia and they were Jewish. And they didn't come to Babylon, their families didn't come to Babylon by choice. You know how did they come? They didn't immigrate. They were forced to move from Palestine to Babylon. So they were taken as hostages, their families were taken, they were forced to move. So they also had a history that was complex because they didn't choose to come there. They were highly educated because what was the philosophy of the Babylonian Empire? The Babylonian Empire thought that everybody belongs to it. You have a Jewish origin, you have a Palestinian origin, you have a Lebanese origin, you still belong to the empire. And especially if you're young and beautiful, they will invest in you. And they will make you a very highly educated person. They will take care that you ride horses, that you look like a cavalier, that you're very much invested in. And they were also religious, because those people who left Palestine, they kept the tradition of their families, and they knew that at one point of time they will go back to Palestine. So they kept the traditions, the Ten Commandments, the law of Moses. So they were religious as well, in a country that was against religion. So the country didn't have a specific religion but to worship the king. So in a way, they had a problem, because the religion of the country was to worship the king, but they were Jewish. They were also young and promising, because they were good guys. They were smart guys, very, very smart. Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego were like the elite of the society. They were like the stars, celebrities in the society. They were very highly educated, very smart, good looking, everything. But the society was also liberal, because it didn't have the same moral codes that them. So they were finding themselves at one point of time, the society would be forgiving if men and women live together and not in sanctity. The society would be forgiving if you start, behaving in a way that was not with the moral code of the law of Moses. So it was a big dilemma, because on one hand, there was the promise of being powerful, being a celebrity, being the stars of the society. And on the other hand, there was your tradition, your religion, that does not agree with everything that is asked from you. And that's why this identity problem existed in the hearts until a specific moment where it was important to answer it correctly. In the next slide, we see what's written in the book of Daniel. So what is written in the book of Daniel? There was a commandment from the king, and the king asked for one thing. What is it? Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. That was a decision by the king, that on his birthday, he doesn't want to have gifts, he wants people to worship him. That was not very odd, because in the old times, kings behaved as gods. So in ancient Egypt, pharaohs were considered as gods, the same in Babylon, and that meant that the subjects, that the citizens were very loyal to the king. So of course it was encouraged, because it doesn't have only a religious meaning, it has also a political meaning. This is how kings ensured that people follow them. They tell you go to war, they obey. They tell you no fight, you fight, because they are gods and goddesses, not kings and queens. So at that point of time, you can imagine Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, or Hananiah, Azariah, Misael required to bow for the king. That is a violation of the first commandment. The first commandment says that you worship only God. You don't bow to any idol. And they had to choose either to fulfill God's commandment or to fulfill Nebuchadnezzar's commandment. And it's not that you can pay, for example, a ransom or pay money, like when you have a parking ticket and you say, sorry, I cannot obey that commandment, I'll pay 50 euros, and then you forgive me, I'm not going to bow to the king. No, the king doesn't take no for an answer, and you cannot buy yourself out of his commandment. And the punishment is extremely impressive. You see, they will be thrown immediately. So even they don't give you the time to think, like, okay, I'll see if I can bow to the king, but maybe I'll come tomorrow and decide. No, just immediately, if you don't obey, you will be thrown into a blazing furnace. Well, now there are many ways to kill people. I don't think blazing furnace is the easiest one of them, because it's a very, very tough way of dying. And of course, a blazing furnace meant that there was a very big furnace, because you want to throw in it not pizzas, but you're going to throw human beings. And it's not going to be a very nice thing that you're going to watch. So very tough request from the king that's putting those people under a big answer, a big question to answer. In the next slide, look, we also pass sometimes by question. We either obey society or it's the furnace. I'm not speaking of a real furnace because none of us has been thrown to a furnace as far as I can see. But furnace can be despair, can be that in your work or in your university, some people ask you questions, and if you answer, you will be deemed as traditionalist, old-fashioned, too religious, believing in nonsense. It's not very easy to profess your Christian faith these days, huh? Sometimes you will be seen as, why do you believe in these things? Or you're not secular enough. Or you are believing that someone walked on water. Or you worship someone who didn't even exist. Some people might think that God didn't even exist. So you know that these days, if you want to profess that you're living in sin, it's going to be easy. And the society is going to accept that. If you want to stand in the street and say that killing babies is something very much acceptable, people will consider you as a liberal, as someone who is pro-choices, and you will be celebrated. But if you want to stand and say, no, I don't oblige very much in killing babies, I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, you will be looking at as if you're coming out of a museum. And people will not accept that very easily. And you will be labeled with stereotypes, traditionalist, old-fashioned, belonging to the Stone Age, whatever it's going to be. So the furnace isn't usually a physical furnace. It can be a spiritual furnace, can be psychological furnace. You can also suffer isolation in your workplace because at the workplace they might encourage things that you don't encourage or accept things that you don't accept. So it's not that easy to profess your Christian faith. You're not going to get a lot of followers on Instagram or Facebook if you start talking about what you believe in. And sometimes this furnace can be your own family, because also your family might believe in different things than you. I'm not speaking only of religious things. Some of our families have moved from their original countries only physically, but not mentally. They just woke up, found themselves in different. So they dress the same way they dressed in their own countries. They eat the same food that they ate in their own countries. And they have the same mindset from the countries that they came from, be it from Egypt, Italy, whatever. They just want to keep their identity, and that is what they think is going to make them survive. And you don't necessarily oblige to that. For example, in their own countries, women wouldn't go out easily. They want to apply this in a new country. It's not easy because women here have a different perspective in life. So you cannot apply the rules of an old society. In the old society, for example, they were not eating pork because it wasn't very much easily accessible. And they come here, want to apply this. Well, but why? Just because it was their society. So this furnace can also be at home. And there are sometimes differences between parents and children. Children see life maybe in a more risk-free way. They want to explore things, they want to travel, they want to eat new things, they want to meet new people, and the parents are protective. And this is a challenge that children of the second generation of immigrants regularly face. So everyone has his own furnace. You cannot escape of that. And the more you stick to Jesus, the hotter the furnace, because Jesus said that we have to pass through the narrow gate. He didn't say that it was a wide gate, he said it was a narrow gate. And when you try to squeeze yourself in a narrow gate, it's not easy, it's hard, it's a furnace. So we have kinds and shapes and sizes of furnaces. And like someone says, yeah, furnace, Nebuchadnezzar, Hanan, Azariah, Mishael, that was like 2,000 years ago, doesn't exist. Let me show you the next slide. On the next slide, you see an actual furnace, which happened in 2015. People living in Libya, professing their Christian faith. Libyans don't like that. They put a knife on their necks, and they tell them, you either believe in our religion and negate Jesus, or we're going to kill you. And that was done in front of cameras and broadcasted over internet. It's not something that happened like St. George 1,500 years ago. It's not a mystery. It's not a legend. It is actual human beings who live in our times, dressed in orange suits and required to profess their faith, and their blood is shed on the shores of the Mediterranean. So it's not a legend, it's not a movie. We have their bodies and can easily see that the heads are disconnected from the rest of their bodies, and they didn't commit suicide. They're people who profess their faith just like their ancestors. So it is a fact that furnaces are not a relic of the past. Furnaces still happen. And everybody must answer at one point of time, what do I believe in? Who am I? What are my values? And that's why the question of who are you in the next slide is still standing today. It's not an enigmatic, theoretical, theological question. It is an actual question that we live in the current world. And in the next slide, I try to mirror what Hanani, Azaria, and Mishael lived with what we live today. So we are Christians, but we're Belgians. Yes, there are things in the society that we don't agree with, but still we're loyal to our society, we're loyal to our country. But we're still also loyal to Jesus. We are Coptic, yes, but we are also sons and daughters. So we have a family and we have to integrate to the family, and we love our families. We don't want to disconnect from our families. We are young and promising, just like Hanani, Azaria, and Mishael, but we also live in a liberal society that sometimes contradicts our values. Are these things contradictory? Can we be successful Christians and successful Belgians? Can we be successful Copts and successful sons and daughters? Can we be young and promising and also successful in a liberal society? Are these things contradictory? The answer is in one thing: in Jesus they are not. We can succeed everywhere and we can do whatever we want in Jesus. Because if you look at the next slide, here is how the Bible summarizes it. This is how the Bible summarizes it. It says, "For he himself is our peace, who has made the two one and has torn down the dividing wall of hostility." Who is he? It says, "For he himself is our peace." He refers to who? He is who? Who is he? It says, "For he himself is our peace." He is our peace. Who is that? Jesus is our peace. Look, the early church wasn't made of people who looked alike, who acted alike, who thought alike. It was a new church made of people who were Jewish, people who were Romans, people who were Arabs, people who were Assyrians, people who were Lebanese, people who were wealthy, people who were poor, people who had education like St. Paul, people who were like fishermen like Peter, people who were wealthy like Zacchaeus, people who were maybe runaways, people who have a bad history such as St. Matthew, people who were born into good families such as John. They were different. But God in his church has this ability to make everything one, has this ability, for he himself is our peace. He is able to make peace between people. He is able to make peace between people and themselves. Who has made the two one. Any kind of contradiction within Jesus disappears. Why? Because God can make miracles, can make two one, can make a man and a woman one in marriage, can make a wealthy and a poor person one in the church, can make a Jewish and a non-Jewish one in the church, can make everybody just like the pieces of his blood and flesh in Eucharist one. So always remember that any contradiction, any identity challenge can be solved in the person of Jesus, because he is the one who created us. So he knows how to bring us back to our origin, how to heal our identities if we have an identity problem. That is one thing that we're going to come to discuss regularly in this meeting. How can Jesus solve our contradictions? How can Jesus solve our problems? How can we bring us peace either at work, in our families, in the church, wherever we go? How can Jesus give us peace within our hearts when we are into a furnace, when we're suffering from big questions in our life, when we are asked to take very strong and very tough decisions, how is He gonna heal us? How is He gonna help us? How is He gonna bring us success? He did it before with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They went to the furnace and it looked like they went for shopping, because they were very much walking through the furnace and nothing touched them. Actually, the people who threw them in the furnace, because of the heat of the furnace, they caught fire and died. So the people who pushed them died. But they themselves went out of the furnace and the odor of the smoke wasn't in their clothes. So if you could smell them after they went out of the furnace, you couldn't smell anything that they were in a furnace. If you attend the Mass and Abuna walks around with the incense, you go back home, you smell the incense in your clothes. Those people went to the furnace, went out as if they went, as I said, to a shopping or for a run or for the stroll in a park. So God can make us walk through a furnace and solve a lot of problems. I'll finish with this one single photo that always comes to our minds. Why did Jesus die on a cross? Could have died in any way possible. But one of the reasons is that when you draw the cross, you reconcile heaven and earth through God coming down to earth. So that's why when we draw the cross, we do like this. It's a reconciliation. What is up and far, seen in the ancient testament as God being distant, coming down to reconcile heaven and earth, but at the same time also reconciling east and west, left and right, Jewish and non-Jewish, wealthy and unwealthy, black and white, any kind of differences in humanities. God, through His cross, makes this relationship stronger between any kind of human beings, but also between what thoughts do you have in your heart and what thoughts do you have in your mind. What thoughts that your family has, what thoughts that you have. So that's the reconciliation in the cross of Jesus.
So the difference between the Eastern Orthodox and the Orthodox, that it is like this first and the Eastern Orthodox is this first.
Yeah, it is something that comes from tradition, but it's still the cross anywhere for Christians is the same. It is one longitudinal line and one transversal line. At the end, it means the same. This comes from a traditional thing from the past. But it doesn't change the fact that for Christians, Jesus, who sits in the middle of two intersecting lines, is the one who solves all the challenges that seem contradictory. What I'm trying to pass to you today, what seems challenging, what seems contradictory in life, can only be solved through looking at the person who is the only one who can solve all these kinds of contradictions. In Him, we get peace. In Him, the two become one, and that is the word that you have seen in the Ephesians. So, in this meeting again, we're going to talk a lot about all these things. Keep Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in your minds. Keep the challenges that they face that are very close to the challenges that we face in your hearts. And let's explore together in this meeting from now on all these kinds of big questions that life poses to us and that we can answer them very fully in the name of Jesus. Amen?